There's this moment that happens right before everything shifts. Not the dramatic movie moment where music swells and everything suddenly makes perfect sense. This is quieter, stranger, more unsettling than that. It's the moment when you realize you've been running the same program for so long that you forgot there were other ways to exist. You've been so committed to this particular version of struggle, this specific flavor of stuck, that it became your identity without you even noticing. Maybe you've felt it lately. That weird restlessness that sits just beneath your skin. The way familiar routines suddenly feel hollow, like you're going through motions that belong to someone else. The way conversations that used to satisfy you now leave you feeling empty, like everyone's speaking a language you used to understand, but somehow forgot. It's not depression, exactly. It's not anxiety, though it might feel similar. It's something else entirely. It's your system recognizing that the loop is ending. And loops, well, they don't end gently. They end with this strange mix of relief and terror because you're about to lose the only reality you've known, even if that reality was slowly suffocating you. See, most people think patterns are just habits we can break with enough willpower. Wake up earlier, eat better, think more positively, manifest harder. But patterns run deeper than habits. Patterns are the invisible architecture of how we move through the world. They're the unspoken agreements we made with life about what's possible, what's safe, what we deserve. And when a pattern is ending, it doesn't just affect what you do. It affects who you think you are. You might have noticed that the things that used to work for you just don't anymore. The coping mechanisms that got you through hard times now feel like they're adding to the problem. The relationships that felt safe now feel suffocating. The goals that used to motivate you now feel meaningless. This isn't failure. This isn't you giving up. This is your soul preparing for something bigger than your current reality can hold. But here's what nobody warns you about. The space between the end of one loop and the beginning of your comeback feels like being suspended in mid-air. Everything you knew about yourself becomes questionable. Everything you thought you wanted becomes unclear. Everything you believed about how life works starts to feel like stories you told yourself to make sense of a world that never really made sense in the first place. And in that space, you start to see things differently. Not because you're trying to be spiritual or deep, but because when all your familiar reference points disappear, you have no choice but to pay attention to what's actually happening instead of what you think should be happening. You start noticing the patterns that were running your life without your conscious permission. The way you automatically say yes when you mean no. The way you chase validation from people who can't even validate themselves. The way you solve problems that aren't actually your problems while ignoring the ones that are. This seeing isn't comfortable. It's not the kind of awareness that feels empowering or enlightening. It's more like finally turning on the lights in a room you've been stumbling around in the dark for years. You see everything clearly for the first time, including all the things you've been bumping into and all the messes you've been making without realizing it. And your first instinct is to turn the lights back off because the truth is overwhelming. But you can't unsee what you've seen. Once you recognize the loop you've been running, you can't pretend it's not there anymore. Once you understand how your patterns have been shaping your reality, you can't go back to believing that life just happens to you. Once you feel the gap between who you've been and who you actually are, you can't squeeze yourself back into that smaller version of yourself. This is where most people panic. They try to force themselves back into the familiar loop because at least it was predictable. At least they knew who they were supposed to be, even if being that person was exhausting. At least they had a script to follow, even if following that script was slowly killing their spirit. But panic is just your system's way of processing the magnitude of what's shifting. It's not a sign that you're going the wrong direction. It's a sign that you're going in a direction that matters. The truth is, your comeback doesn't begin when you feel ready for it. It begins when the old way of being becomes more painful than the unknown. It begins when staying the same starts to feel like a betrayal of everything you know you could become. It begins when you finally understand that the life you've been living was never really yours to begin with. It was just a collection of other people's expectations and your own fear-based decisions, dressed up to look like choices. Your comeback begins in the recognition that you've been playing a game with rules you never agreed to. Rules about what success looks like, what happiness means, what love should feel like, what you're supposed to want from life. And once you see those rules for what they really are, borrowed beliefs that never fit your actual experience, you start to remember something you forgot a long time ago. You start to remember what it feels like to make decisions from your center instead of from your wounds. But remembering isn't the same as knowing how to live from that place. There's this awkward phase where you can see clearly, but you don't yet know how to act on what you see. You know, the old patterns don't serve you, but you haven't developed new ones yet. You know, the old version of you was performing a role, but you're not sure who you are when you're not performing. You know, you want something different, but you can't quite name what that something is. This is the phase where you have to learn to be comfortable with not knowing what comes next, not knowing if you're making the right choices, not knowing if the people in your life will understand the changes you're going through, not knowing if you're strong enough to handle whatever your comeback requires of you. And this not knowing isn't a problem to be solved. It's a space to be inhabited. Because in that space of not knowing, something incredible starts to happen. You start to hear yourself think without the constant noise of everyone else's opinions. You start to feel what you actually want without the pressure of what you think you should want. You start to move through your days with a different kind of attention, like you're finally present in your own life instead of watching it happen from the outside. And slowly, quietly, without fanfare or dramatic revelation, you start to make different choices. Small ones at first. You say no to things that drain you without offering long explanations. You stop participating in conversations that feel toxic or empty. You choose rest when your body asks for it instead of pushing through, because productivity culture told you that rest is lazy. You start to honor your actual rhythms instead of forcing yourself to fit into schedules that never worked for you. These small different choices start to add up. They create new neural pathways, new ways of being in the world. They signal to your nervous system that safety doesn't have to come from staying small. They teach your body that peace is possible, even in the midst of uncertainty. They show your spirit that authenticity isn't dangerous, it's liberating. And then something shifts. Not all at once, but gradually, like the way seasons change. You start to feel more like yourself in your own skin. Conversations flow differently. Opportunities appear that align with who you're becoming instead of who you used to be. People respond to you differently because you're showing up differently. The energy you used to spend maintaining facades is now available for creating the life you actually want. This is when you realize that your comeback was never about returning to who you used to be. It was about discovering who you've always been underneath all the conditioning and compromise. It was about peeling away every layer that wasn't actually you until what remains is so undeniably real that you can't apologize for it anymore. And that's when you understand why the loop had to end. Not because you failed at maintaining it, but because you outgrew the container it was trying to keep you in. But here's where it gets interesting. The version of you that emerges from this process isn't some polished, perfected final form. It's rawer than that, more honest, more willing to be seen in its imperfection. You stop trying to be the person everyone can understand and start being the person you can respect. You stop performing stability and start living from whatever stability you can actually access in each moment. This new way of being confuses people at first. They're used to the predictable version of you, the one who showed up in familiar ways, who had familiar reactions, who stayed within familiar boundaries. When you start operating from this deeper place, some people don't know what to do with you. They'll ask what's different, what's changed, and you'll struggle to explain, because the change isn't in what you're doing, it's in why you're doing it. You're no longer making decisions to avoid discomfort or to maintain other people's comfort with who you used to be. You're making decisions because they align with something true inside you, something that feels more like coming home than performing competence. And this alignment creates a different kind of energy, a different kind of presence that people can sense even when they can't name it. Your relationships start to recalibrate. Some people step back because they were only comfortable with the version of you that needed fixing, or saving, or managing. Others step closer because they recognize something authentic that they've been hungry for in their own lives. New people appear who seem to understand your frequency without you having to explain it. Old people reveal depths you never knew they had because you're finally showing up with enough authenticity to invite their authenticity in return. Work changes too, not necessarily your job, though that might shift as well, but how you approach whatever work you do. You stop trying to prove your worth through over-delivering and start delivering value from a place of genuine contribution. You stop saying yes to opportunities that drain your soul just because they look good on paper. You start recognizing the difference between challenges that grow you and challenges that diminish you. Money starts to flow differently, not because you've suddenly become financially savvy, but because you're no longer making decisions from scarcity and fear. You stop spending money to fill emotional holes or to project an image that isn't really you. You stop accepting less than your worth because you finally understand what you're worth. You start investing in things that actually nourish your life instead of things that just look like they should. Your relationship with time transforms completely. You stop rushing through your days, trying to get to some future moment when life will finally begin. You stop scheduling every minute because you're afraid of what you might discover in stillness. You start to inhabit your actual life instead of just managing it. You realize that presence isn't something you have to achieve through meditation or mindfulness practices. It's something that happens naturally when you stop running from yourself. Sleep becomes different, not just because you're less anxious, though that's part of it, but because you're no longer exhausted from maintaining a persona that was never sustainable. You're no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations or trying to solve problems that aren't yours to solve. Your nervous system finally gets the message that it's safe to rest, safe to let your guard down, safe to trust that you can handle whatever comes without having to be hypervigilant about every possible threat. Dreams change too. The recurring dreams that used to visit you, the ones where you were always late or lost or unprepared, they start to fade. Instead, you have dreams where you're moving through spaces that feel like home, where you're having conversations that feel real, where you're doing things that feel meaningful. Your subconscious mind starts processing possibility instead of just fear. And then you start to notice something remarkable. The things you thought you needed to force, or chase, or earn, through struggle, start showing up naturally. Not because you've learned some manifestation technique or positive thinking hack, but because you're finally aligned with the frequency of what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want. Creative projects that felt impossible suddenly have clear next steps. Conversations you've been avoiding resolve themselves with surprising ease. Health issues that seemed chronic start to shift as your stress levels recalibrate. Opportunities appear that feel both unexpected and inevitable, like they were waiting for you to become someone who could recognize and receive them. This isn't magic. It's not the universe rewarding you for finally getting your act together. It's what happens when you stop working against your own nature and start working with it. It's what becomes possible when you stop fragmenting your energy across 1,000 different versions of yourself and start channeling it through one authentic expression. But the most profound change isn't in what happens to you. It's in how you respond to what happens to you. Challenges don't disappear, but your relationship to challenge transforms. Instead of seeing problems as evidence that you're doing something wrong, you start seeing them as information about what wants to shift. Instead of collapsing when things get difficult, you develop a curious relationship with difficulty. You start to understand that your comeback isn't a destination you reach. It's a way of being you grow into. It's not about arriving at some final version of yourself where everything is figured out and nothing ever goes wrong again. It's about developing the capacity to stay connected to who you are, no matter what's happening around you. And in that connection, in that unshakable sense of your own authenticity, you find something you didn't even know you were looking for. Not happiness, exactly, though joy becomes more accessible. Not success, though achievement becomes more natural. What you find is a deep, quiet knowing that you belong in your own life, that you have a right to take up space, that your perspective matters, that your contribution is needed, that you don't have to earn your place in the world. You already have it. So if you're in that strange space right now, if you're feeling the restlessness and the confusion and the weird mix of terror and anticipation, know that you're exactly where you need to be. Your loop is ending, not because you failed at maintaining it, but because you've outgrown it. Your comeback isn't waiting for you to feel ready. It's already begun in every moment. You choose authenticity over performance, truth over comfort, growth over safety. The person you're becoming has been waiting patiently underneath all the noise, all the expectations, all the borrowed dreams that never fit. They've been there through every compromise, every moment you betrayed yourself to keep the peace, every time you made yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold your full expression. And now, they're finally getting their chance to breathe, to speak, to move through the world without apology. This isn't about becoming someone new. This is about remembering who you've always been and having the courage to live from that place, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unfamiliar, even when no one understands. Your comeback doesn't need to look impressive to anyone else. It doesn't need to come with fanfare or external validation. It just needs to feel true to you. And when it does, when you're finally living from that unshakable core of who you actually are, you'll understand why everything had to fall apart first, because some things can only be built on the foundation of what's real.